picked the wrong widow.
System that would protect him.
When the system failed a widow,
They've done this before.
a family of veterans showed up.
Dorothy Rayburn's late husband wasn't just any veteran. He was family to the Iron Ridge Riders, a motorcycle club that doesn't forget its own. When those bikers showed up, they didn't bring weapons. They didn't bring threats. What they brought was so much smarter. And by hour 48, the squatters were begging police to arrest them just to escape. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Are you in your living room in Texas? Maybe you're driving through California, listening on your commute. Perhaps you're having coffee in your kitchen in Florida, or winding down for the night in Michigan. Drop your state in the comments. Let's see how far this community reaches, because what you're about to hear, it could happen anywhere, to anyone, and knowing we're all watching together from every corner of this country that matters. Now, let's get into how one phone call changed everything for a widow who thought she'd lost it all. The morning sun filters through lace curtains in a modest ranch home on Willow Creek Road, Riverside County, Oregon. Dorothy R. Byrne, 71 years old, moves slowly through her kitchen, her slippers shuffling against worn linoleum that's seen 4 decades of daily life. The coffee maker gurgles its familiar morning song, filling the air with a rich aroma that once meant the start of shared conversations, quiet laughter, and the comfortable silence of a marriage that had weathered everything life could throw at it. Dorothy reaches into the cabinet and pulls down 2 ceramic mugs, blue ones with hand-painted flowers fading from years of use. She pours coffee into both, adding cream to one just the way Vernon liked it. Then she stops staring at that second cup, steam rising like a ghost. It's been 3 weeks since they buried him. 3 weeks since the flag was folded at the veteran cemetery. 3 weeks since the house fell silent, in a way it had never been silent before. But old habits die hard. In some habits, she doesn't want to die at all. Vernon Wern served 2 tours in Vietnam, came home with medals he rarely spoke about and nightmares he learned to live with. They'd built this life together. This home, filling it with memories that now line every wall. His bronze star sits in a shadow box above the fireplace. Photographs from Dong from their wedding day from 40 years of moments that mattered cover the mantle like a timeline of devotion. In the corner, his reading chair sits empty, a book still marked at page 117, waiting for a reader who will never return. Dorothy carries her coffee to the back door. Stepping into the cool Oregon morning, Vernon's rose garden greets her. The bush is heavy with late-season blooms in deep reds and soft pinks. He planted the first one the day they moved in back in 1983. Every anniversary after that, one more bush until the garden became a living calendar of their years together. She kneels slowly, her knees protesting, and begins pulling weeds from around the latest edition planted just 4 months ago for their 40th anniversary. Vernon never got to see it bloom. This is her routine now. Coffee, roses, memories, the quiet rhythm of grief, the gentle work of learning to live in a house that feels too big and too empty all at once. Dorothy finds peace here among the petals and thorns, talking softly to Vernon, as if he might still hear her, as if love doesn't end just because a heart stops beating. But Dorothy's peaceful morning was about to be shattered by a criminal enterprise she didn't even know existed. While Dorothy tends her roses, while she honors her husband's memory in the garden he loved, there are people who hunt the vulnerable. Professional squatters? Not the desperate homeless seeking shelter from the cold, but calculating criminals who've turned property theft into a business model. They scour obituaries like shopping catalogs, searching for fresh widows and widowers. They pull property records looking for homes owned outright, no mortgage to complicate things. They use Google Earth to find isolated houses, places where neighbors might not notice unusual activity right away. They forge lease agreements that look legitimate enough to fool police officers in the critical first hours. They know the laws better than most lawyers. Understand that squatters' rights legislation designed to protect tenants from predatory landlords can be twisted into a weapon against the very people it was meant to help. These criminals move fast, strike hard, and disappear into legal gray areas where the system protects them instead of their victims. They've learned that possession is 9/10 of the law, and that once they're inside, once they've established even the illusion of tenancy, the legal system moves at a pace measured in months and years, not hours and days. By the time a homeowner navigates the eviction process, these predators have stripped the property of everything valuable and moved on to the next target. Dorothy Rayburn's name, her address, her recent widowhood, all of it had been on a list for 11 days. They'd watched her routine. They'd noted that she lived alone. They'd confirmed there were no grown children living nearby, no family checking in daily. They'd seen the Farrell sign go up briefly, then come back down when Dorothy couldn't bear to leave the home she'd shared with Vernon. To them, she was perfect, isolated, grieving, unprotected. They'd chosen her specifically, and they were coming tonight. If you believe criminals like this should face real consequences, hit that subscribe button because this story proves justice still exists when good people fight back. 2 a.m. Dorothy wakes to a sound that doesn't belong. Glass shattering somewhere toward the front of the house. Her heart hammers as she sits up in bed, disoriented, reaching instinctively for Vernon's side of the bed before remembering he isn't there. She hears voices now. Male voices laughing. The heavy thud of footsteps on her hardwood floors. For a moment, she thinks she's dreaming, but then comes the scrape of furniture being dragged, the bang of her front door hitting the wall, and Dorothy's confusion crystallizes into terror. Someone is in her house. She grabs her robe, her hands shaking so badly she can barely tie it. She moves down the hallway, each step feeling like walking through water, her breath coming in short gasps. When she reaches the living room, she stops cold. 3 strangers are moving through her home like they own it. A man in his 40s, muscular build, is directing 2 others as they carry boxes and duffel bags through her splintered front door. A younger woman with bleached hair is already rearranging Dorothy's furniture. Another man is disconnecting her television. Dorothy's voice comes out as a whisper at first, then louder. "What are you doing? Who are you?" The older man turns and his smile is what she'll remember most later. Confident, practiced. Not the smile of someone caught doing something wrong, but the smile of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and doesn't care that she's watching. "G.G. Walsh," he says, extending his hand as if they're meeting at a church social. "This is Brianna, and that's Travis. We're your new tenants." Dorothy feels the room tilt. "Tenants, this is my house. You need to leave right now." Garrett reaches into his jacket and pulls out a document, unfolding it with theatrical slowness. "Actually, according to this lease agreement, we have legal right to occupy this property. Signed, dated, everything official." Dorothy stares at the paper. It looks real. Stamps, signatures, legal language she doesn't understand, but she knows it's wrong. It has to be wrong. "This is my house," she says, her voice breaking. "I've lived here since 1983, that's 40 years. You can't just not according to this." Garrett interrupts, his smile never wavering. "You're trespassing, lady." The words hit her like a physical blow. Trespassing in her own home. In the house where she raised a life, buried a husband, tended a garden that counted their years together in roses. Dorothy's legs nearly give out. This can't be happening. This can't be real. But it is real. The strangers keep moving, keep claiming her space. And Dorothy realizes with dawning horror that they're not leaving. They're settling in. And when she called 911, the response she got would make her blood run cold. The patrol car arrives 18 minutes after Dorothy's call. 18 minutes that feel like 18 hours. As she stands in her own living room, watching strangers sort through her life. Officers Yates and Gomez step through the broken door frame, their flashlights sweeping across the scene. Dorothy rushes to them, words tumbling out in a desperate flood. "Thank God you're here. These people broke into my house. They've destroyed my door. They're stealing my things. Please, you have to make them leave." Officer Yates, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, holds up a hand. "Ma'am, let's just slow down and figure out what's happening here." He turns to Garrett, who's already walking over with that same confident smile. The forged lease held out like a shield. "Officers, I'm glad you're here. We have a legal lease agreement for this property. We moved in tonight as arranged. This woman is claiming ownership, but as you can see, everything's in order." Yates takes the document, and Dorothy watches his face as he reads it. She watches the way his eyebrows rise slightly, the way he exchanges a glance with Officer Gomez. They're examining the paper under their flashlights, checking the signatures, the notary stamp, the property description. It all looks legitimate. That's the problem. It looks completely legitimate, ma'am. Yates says, turning back to Dorothy. "Do you have documentation proving you own this property? Deed, mortgage papers, anything like that?" "Of course I do," Dorothy says, her voice rising. "They're in my file cabinet in my office because this is my house." But even as she says it, she sees the way the officers are looking at each other. The way they're already shifting their weight, preparing to deliver news she doesn't want to hear. Gomez speaks next, her voice gentler but no less devastating. "Mrs. Arburn in Oregon. If someone has a lease agreement and they're occupying a property, This becomes a civil matter, not a criminal one. Even if there's a dispute about the validity of the lease, we can't forcibly remove them. That's not how the law works. Dorothy feels the floor dropping away beneath her. What are you saying? They broke my door. They broke into my house. They're saying, Yates adds, his tone apologetic but firm, they had permission to be here. The lease gives them that permission. Now you're saying the lease is fraudulent, and that may very well be true. But proving that requires a court. You'll need to file for eviction, get a lawyer, go through the legal process. How long does that take? Dorothy's voice is barely a whisper now. Yates exhales slowly. 4 to 6 months minimum. Could be longer if they contest it, if they request continuances, if the court's backlogged. In some cases, it can take more than a year. The words don't make sense. They can't make sense. Dorothy looks from the officers to the strangers now lounging on her furniture, and she sees it in their faces. The smirks, the knowing looks. Garrett's eyes lock with hers, and he gives her the smallest nod, a silent message that says, "We know exactly what we're doing. We've done this before, and there's nothing you can do about it." "Ma'am," Officer Yates says, and now his voice carries a tone that makes Dorothy's stomach drop even further. "I'm going to need you to step outside. If they have a valid lease and you don't have documentation immediately available proving otherwise, then technically you're the one who needs to leave until this gets sorted out in court." Dorothy stares at him. "You're joking." "I wish I was. But if we don't do this by the book, anything that happens here could hurt your case later. You need to gather your important documents, some clothes, and find somewhere else to stay while you get a lawyer." This is the moment Dorothy's world truly shatters. Not when she woke to the sound of breaking glass. Not when strangers told her she was trespassing in her own home. But now, as police officers, the people sworn to protect her, the people she called for help, escort her onto her own front porch while criminals remain inside. She watches Officer Gomez supervise as she's allowed back in briefly to grab a few belongings. She watches Brianna sitting in Vernon's chair. She watches Travis hanging a poster over the shadow box containing her husband's medals. And she watches Garrett Walsh standing in her doorway, arms crossed, as the police walk her down her own driveway and tell her she cannot return until a court says otherwise. The patrol car drives away, leaving Dorothy standing on the sidewalk in her bathrobe, a single bag of hastily grabbed clothes at her feet, staring at the house she's lived in for 40 years. The house that no longer belongs to her. At least not tonight. Dorothy had nowhere to go. No family nearby, but she had one number she'd kept for 40 years. A promise Vernon made her write down just in case. It was time to make that call. Phyllis Chin finds Dorothy standing on the sidewalk at 3:00 in the morning, clutching a canvas bag and staring at her own house like she's watching it burn. Phyllis, 68 and widowed herself 5 years back, doesn't ask questions. She just wraps a sweater around Dorothy's shoulders and leads her next door into warmth and safety in a kitchen that smells like the tea she puts on to boil without being asked. Dorothy sits at Phyllis's table, her hands shaking so badly she can barely hold the mug placed in front of her. She tells the story in fragments, sentences that don't quite connect, her voice hollow with shock. Phyllis listens, her face growing harder with each detail. And when Dorothy finishes, Phyllis reaches across the table and squeezes her hand. "We're calling the police again," Phyllis says. "They already came. They made me leave." Dorothy's voice cracks on the last word, and she presses her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back tears that come anyway. "I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone. Vernon's gone. Our daughter moved to Australia 20 years ago. I don't even know who to call." But even as she says it, something stirs in her memory. A promise. A piece of paper. Dorothy reaches for her purse with trembling fingers, dumping its contents onto Phyllis's kitchen table. Lipstick, tissues, her wallet, loose change, and then wedged in the bottom corner, a small folded piece of paper yellowed with age. The creases nearly worn through from decades of being carried but never used. She unfolds it carefully. The handwriting is Vernon's, written in the careful block letters he learned in the military. Just a name and a phone number. Leon Briggs, Iron Ridge. Dorothy stares at it, and suddenly she's transported back 40 years to a conversation she'd almost forgotten. Vernon had just come home from a reunion with some of the men he'd served with in Vietnam. He'd been quiet that night, the way he always got when the memories came back too strong. But before bed, he'd sat her down and written this number, pressing it into her hand. "If anything ever happens to me," Vernon had said, "and you need help, real help, you call this man, Leon breaks. He'll come. I promise you that. She'd asked him why, and Vernon had looked at her with eyes that held stories he could never fully tell. Because in Dong, in '68, Leon Briggs pulled me out of an ambush that should have killed us both. And 2 months later, I returned the favor. That kind of debt, Dorothy, it doesn't expire. It passes on. You understand? She nodded, tucked the paper in her purse, and never thought about it again. Until now. Leon breaks. Vernon had told her more over the years in bits and pieces. How Leon came home from Vietnam different than he left, like so many of them did. How he found his brotherhood again with the Iron Ridge Riders, a motorcycle club made up mostly of veterans who understood what the civilian world never could. Not a criminal gang, Vernon always insisted, but a family. Men who'd seen the worst of humanity and decided to be the best of it. Men who looked after their own. Vernon had stayed civilian, built a quiet life with Dorothy, but he and Leon remained brothers in the way only combat veterans can be brothers. Birthday cards every year, phone calls on the anniversary of the day they both should have died. A bond forged in blood and terror and mutual salvation. Dorothy picks up Phyllis's phone, her fingers steadier now, and dials the number. It rings once, twice, 3 times. At 3:30 in the morning, she's not even sure he'll answer. But on the 4th ring, there's a click and a voice like gravel and whiskey comes through the line. This better be important. Leon Briggs, Dorothy's voice wavers. This is Dorothy Rern, Vernon's wife. Vernon passed 3 weeks ago, and I need help. Something's happened. The silence on the other end stretches for 3 heartbeats. Then Leon's voice comes back. All the sleep gone from it, replaced by something sharp and focused. Tell me everything. And Dorothy does. She tells him about the broken door, the strangers in her home, the forged lease, the police who couldn't help, the house she can't enter. She tells him about standing on her own sidewalk at 2 in the morning, about feeling more alone than she's ever felt in her life. When she finishes, the silence returns, and Dorothy realizes she's holding her breath. Leon's voice, when it comes, carries a weight that feels like a promise being made. We'll handle this legal-like. But what did that mean? By 4:30 in the morning, the Iron Ridge Clubhouse in Riverside County is blazing with lights. Leon Briggs made 7 phone calls after hanging up with Dorothy, and those 7 calls turned into 28 more. Now, 28 members of the Iron Ridge Riders stand in the main hall, some still in their pajamas under leather jackets. Others looking like they never went to bed at all. Coffee brews in industrial-sized pots. The air smells of motor oil, leather, and something harder to define. Purpose, maybe, or anger held on a very tight leash. Leon stands at the front of the room, and the murmur of conversation dies the moment he clears his throat. Most of you knew Vernon Raburn, he begins, his voice carrying to every corner. Vietnam vet, good man, the kind of brother you could count on when the world went to hell. He died 3 weeks ago, and tonight criminals broke into his widow's home. They're squatting there right now, and the police say it's a civil matter. The room erupts, voices raised in disbelief and fury. Someone punches a wall, but Leon raises his hand and silence returns. We're going to fix this, he says, but we're going to do it right. From the side of the room, a man steps forward. Raymond Kowalski, known to everyone as Hitch, 56 years old, with silver threading through his beard and eyes that have seen the inside of 2 mini courtrooms. He's the club president, but more importantly for this moment, he's a former attorney who left private practice 15 years ago because, as he puts it, he got tired of helping rich people get richer. Now he rides, works part-time at a veterans legal aid clinic, and uses his law degree for things that actually matter. Before anyone suggests anything stupid, Hitch says, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding rooms, we do this smart, no laws broken, no violence, no threats. We use their own system against them because that's the only way this ends with Dorothy back in her home and those criminals in handcuffs next to him. Diana Rees nods. She's 49, the club's vice president, and by day she works as a paralegal at a firm that specializes in property law. She's already got her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm pulling Oregon's squatter statutes right now, she says. If these people are professional squatters, they know the law, which means we need to know it better. Across the room, Thomas Abbott, everyone calls him Wrench, 61 years old and built like a man who spent his life under car hoods and on battlefields, crosses his arms. He served 2 tours in Vietnam, came home and never really left the brotherhood behind. Vernon saved my life in Kian, he says quietly. Whatever we're doing, I'm in. A younger voice speaks up from the back. Kevin Shao, 31, the club's newest member and the only one who actually understands how social media works. If they're professional criminals, they've done this before, which means there's a trail. Digital footprints? I can find them. Leon looks around the room at faces young and old, at veterans and civilians, at mechanics and lawyers and construction workers and teachers. The Iron Ridge Riders aren't a gang. They're a family, a community, and one of their own is in trouble. Pitch spreads a map of Riverside County across the table, marking Dorothy's address with a red pen. Here's what we know. Professional squatters broke into a widow's home, forged documents to establish false tenancy, and they're betting on the system being too slow to stop them before they've stripped everything of value. They've probably done this a dozen times before, and they'll do it a dozen times after unless someone stops them. He looks up, meeting the eyes of everyone in the room. We're going to stop them, but here's how this works. We don't touch them. We don't threaten them. We don't give them a single reason to call the police and claim they're being harassed or intimidated. Instead, we become the most law-abiding, most visible, most persistent presence they've ever encountered. We make their lives uncomfortable in ways that are completely, utterly legal. And while we're doing that, Diana and I are going to find every legal avenue to get them out of that house. Diana looks up from her laptop. I've got it. Oregon Revised Statute 105.836. If we can prove the lease is fraudulent, and if we can prove elder abuse, we can get an expedited hearing. Not for months, maybe 4 days. Then that's what we do, Leon says. But we need evidence. We need documentation. We need everything these people have ever done wrong. And we need it fast. Kevin's already on his phone, fingers scrolling through databases most people don't know exist. Give me names. I'll find their history. Around the room, members are pulling out notepads, opening laptops, making calls. This isn't what most people picture when they think of motorcycle clubs. There are no weapons being distributed, no plans for intimidation or violence. Instead, there are legal pads filling with notes about property law. There are phones calling county clerks and legal aid societies. There are laptops searching court records and social media accounts. Pitch surveys his people, and something like pride flickers across his face. We do this smart. No laws broken, no violence. We use their own system against them. And when this is over, Dorothy Rayburn goes home and these criminals learn that you don't prey on the families of fallen veterans. Not in our county. The plan begins forming. Assignments get handed out. Diana will handle legal research and filings. Kevin will dig into the squatters' backgrounds. Wrench will coordinate the physical presence, making sure there are always eyes on that house. Leon will be the liaison with Dorothy, keeping her informed, keeping her safe, and Hitch, he'll be the general, coordinating everything, making sure not a single rule gets broken, not a single law gets bent, because that's the only way this works. Within 24 hours, the bikers would deploy a strategy so clever, so perfectly legal that the squatters wouldn't know what hit them. But first, they needed intelligence. Comment, I stand for justice. If you believe communities should protect their own against predators like these squatters. By dawn, Diana Ruiz has been at her laptop for 3 hours straight. Her eyes burning from the screen's glow, her coffee gone cold in the mug beside her. But she's found gold. Digital gold. The kind that turns a desperate situation into a winnable fight. Got him, she announces, and the cluster of bikers around her lean in to look at the screen. Garrett Walsh, 43 years old, and look at this. 7 prior eviction cases across 3 states, California, Washington, and Idaho. Every single one follows the same pattern. Targets elderly homeowners, produces fraudulent lease agreements, occupies the property while the legal system grinds through eviction proceedings. By the time the courts catch up, he stripped the house of anything valuable and moved on to the next victim. Leon, standing behind her shoulder, feels his jaw tighten. What happened to the homeowners? Diana scrolls through the court records, her voice growing quieter. 2 lost their homes entirely, couldn't afford the legal fees and the mortgage while fighting the eviction. 1 died of a heart attack during the proceedings. The others eventually got their properties back, but only after months of hell. And Walsh. He's never served a day in jail. Always manages to disappear before criminal charges stick. Pitch leans over, reading the screen. What about the other 2? The woman and the other man. Diana's fingers fly across the keyboard. Brianna Volt, 29, identity theft charges in Arizona 3 years ago, pled down to a misdemeanor, probation. And Travis Kemp, 38. This one's interesting. He's got an outstanding warrant in Nevada. Fraud charges failed to appear at his court date 8 months ago. The room goes quiet. An outstanding warrant changes everything. Kevin Xiao looks up from his own laptop across the room, his face lit by the blue glow of multiple screens. "You guys need to see this," he says, and there's something in his voice that makes everyone turn. He rotates his laptop so the group can see. I found their social media, all three of them, and they're not being subtle. On the screen, a video plays. It's Brianna filming herself walking through Dorothy's living room, her voice dripping with mockery. "Check out her new place, guys." Rountree living at its finest. Old lady didn't even put up a fight. The camera pans across Vernon's military memorabilia, across the photographs on the mantle, across the furniture that's been in that house for 40 years. Travis appears in frame holding up Vernon's bronze star, laughing. "Think we can pawn this?" The video has 23 likes, 11 comments, most of them laughing emojis and congratulations. Kevin scrolls down. There's more. Garrett posted this 2 hours ago. Another video. This one showing the broken front door. Garrett's face grinning into the camera. Another successful acquisition. Oregon edition. To all my haters who said I couldn't do it again, look where I'm sleeping tonight. He pans the camera to show Dorothy's bedroom. Her belongings shoved into corners. His own stuff already spread across her bed. Wrench, standing at the back of the group, makes a sound low in his throat. They're bragging. They're actually bragging about this. Kevin nods, his fingers already screenshotting, downloading, archiving everything. They're documenting their own crime. Every post, every video, it's time-stamped, geotagged, publicly accessible. They're so confident the system can't touch them. They're treating this like entertainment. Diana's already pulling up legal codes on her screen. This is evidence, admissible evidence. They're confessing to criminal trespass, theft, elder abuse, all of it on camera with timestamps. Hitch allows himself a small smile. They think they're untouchable. They've gotten away with it so many times they've gotten sloppy, arrogant. Leon crosses his arms, staring at the frozen image of Garrett Walsh grinning into the camera from Dorothy's bedroom. So we've got their history. We've got their current crime documented by their own hands. And we've got an outstanding warrant on one of them. What else do we need? Diana closes her laptop and looks up at the group. We need a judge to see all of this. But more than that, we need leverage. We need to make them crack. Make them do something stupid, something that escalates this from a civil matter to a criminal one. And we need to do it fast before they strip that house and disappear like they've done 6 times before. Kevin's still scrolling through social media. There's something else. Look at their follower counts. Garrett has 18,000 followers. He's been documenting his squatting operation for years. He's got a whole community of people who think this is genius, who are learning his methods. This isn't just about Dorothy's house. This is about stopping a guy who's teaching other criminals how to do this. The weight of that settles over the room. This isn't just about one elderly widow. It's about a system being exploited, about vulnerable people across multiple states, about a predator who's been allowed to operate freely because he understands the law better than his victims do. The bikers now had everything they needed, but phase 1 of their plan would seem almost harmless. That was the genius of it. 7 on a Thursday morning, the sun just beginning to burn off the Oregon mist, and 6 Harley-Davidsons roll slowly down Willow Creek Road. They're not racing. They're not revving their engines. They're just riding steady and purposeful until they reach Dorothy Rayburn's house and pull to a stop along the public street. Parking legally, carefully, each bike positioned with precision. Leon Briggs dismounts first, followed by Wrench, Hitch, and 3 other members. They're wearing their club vests, their leather worn soft from years of road miles. But there's nothing threatening in their movements. They look like men arriving for a job, which in a sense they are. From the back of one motorcycle, Wrench unstraps a collection of folding lawn chairs. Another biker pulls out a cooler. Someone else sets up a small camp stove on the sidewalk. Within 10 minutes, they've created what looks like a tailgate party, except there's no game to watch, just a house, Dorothy's house. And they're watching it the way security guards watch a building. Constant, alert, present, they sit. They open the cooler and pull out water bottles. Wrench pours coffee from a thermos. One of them unfolds a newspaper. To anyone passing by, they might look like friends gathering for a morning hangout. Except for the way their eyes never leave that house. Except for the way they've positioned themselves with clear sightlines to every exit. Except for the absolute stillness in the way they wait. Inside the house, Garrett Walsh is the first to notice. He comes to the window, pulls back the curtain Dorothy made 20 years ago, and stares out at the bikers sitting on the sidewalk. He watches them for a full minute. They don't move. They don't shout. They just sit there, coffee in hand, calm as Sunday morning. Garrett's jaw tightens. He walks to the front door, throws it open, and steps onto the porch. The porch that isn't his. Dorothy's porch. "What do you want?" He shouts across the yard, his voice carrying that edge of aggression meant to intimidate. "You got a problem?" Hitch looks up from his newspaper, takes a slow sip of coffee, and his voice when he speaks is conversational, friendly even. "Not at all. Just enjoying the public space. Nice morning, isn't it?" Garrett stares. "You can't just sit here." Actually, Hitch says, still calm, still pleasant. "We can public sidewalk, public street. We're not on your property. We're not blocking traffic. We're not creating a disturbance. We're just sitting here. That's not illegal, is it?" The question hangs in the air because, of course, it's not illegal, and Garrett knows it. He also knows exactly what's happening because he's a man who understands tactics, who's used the legal system as a weapon his entire adult life. He's being watched, monitored, and there's not a single law being broken that would let him call the police and make them leave. Brianna joins him on the porch, her arms crossed. This is harassment. Leon speaks for the first time, his gravel voice carrying across the yard. Harassment requires threatening behavior. "Ma'am, we're just sitting. Haven't said a word to you until you came out and started talking to us." Travis appears in the doorway behind them. And for a moment, all three squatters stand there staring at six bikers who stare back with the patience of men who've outlasted firefights and ambushes, who know that some battles are won not with force, but with presence. "Whatever," Garrett finally says, trying to salvage his authority. "Sit there all day if you want. Doesn't change anything. This is still our house." He goes back inside, slamming the door, but everyone watching knows the truth. It bothers him. It bothers him a lot. The bikers don't react to the door slam. They just continue sitting, continue watching. At noon, 3 more motorcycles arrive. The shift change happens smoothly, practiced. 3 bikers leave. 3 stay. 3 new ones join. Now there are 9 people on that sidewalk. More lawn chairs. Another cooler. Someone sets up a small grill and starts cooking burgers. The smell drifting across Dorothy's yard. Neighbors start coming out curious. Phyllis arrives with lemonade and cookies. An elderly man from 2 houses down brings folding chairs from his garage. A younger woman stops while walking her dog, asks what's happening, and when the bikers explain, when they tell her about Dorothy and Vernon and the criminals inside that house, her face goes hard. She takes out her phone and starts making calls. By 3 in the afternoon, there are 12 bikers present, and they've been joined by 6 neighbors. Someone brings a canopy tent to provide shade. The gathering looks less like a protest and more like a block party, except for the absolute focus on that one house. Inside, the squatters keep checking the windows. Every time they look out, there are more people, more eyes, more witnesses to whatever they might do next. The comfortable anonymity they've relied on in past operations, the isolation of their victims, it's gone, shattered, replaced by a community that's decided to show up. Garrett calls the police at 4:30. Officers Yates and Gomez return and they walk the perimeter, checking the setup, but everything is legal. The bikers are on public property. They're not blocking anything. They're not threatening anyone. They're not violating noise ordinances or loitering laws. They're just there. Officer Yates approaches Hitch. "You planning to stay here long?" "As long as it takes," Hitch says simply. Yates nods slowly. And there's something in his expression that might be approval. "Keep it legal. That's the plan, officer. That's always the plan." By evening, as the sun starts to set, there are 12 bikers in rotation settling in for the night shift. They've brought sleeping bags, more supplies. They're not going anywhere. Inside the house, Garrett Walsh stands at the window watching the bikers who watch him back. He's laughing, trying to show Brianna and Travis that this doesn't bother him, that it's just a minor inconvenience. But his laugh sounds hollow even to his own ears. The squatters laughed it off that first day. By day 2, they weren't laughing anymore. Day 2 dawn, and Garrett Walsh opens the curtains to find that the 6 bikers from yesterday have multiplied. There are now 20 motorcycles lining Willow Creek Road, 20 leather-clad men and women sitting in formation, watching his stolen sanctuary with the kind of attention that makes skin crawl. He closes the curtains quickly, but the image stays burned in his mind. 20 pairs of eyes all trained on him. At 8 in the morning, precisely when the noise ordinance expires and daytime sound levels become legal, someone turns on a speaker. The opening notes of the Star-Spangled Banner fill the air, played at a volume that's loud, but not violating any laws. Hitch checked, Diana verified. Everything they're doing exists in that perfect space of completely, utterly, maddeningly legal. The anthem ends. And then comes America the Beautiful. Then God Bless America, a playlist of patriotic music that cycles on repeat. A constant reminder of the veteran whose home has been stolen, whose widow sits displaced while criminals sleep in his bed. Wrench, true to his nickname, has set up what can only be described as a mobile motorcycle repair station on the public street. He's got tools spread out on a tarp, a bike up on a portable lift, and he's doing a full maintenance check. Perfectly legal. He's not blocking traffic. He's not creating a hazard. He's just a man working on his motorcycle on a public street which happens to be directly in front of the house where squatters are trying to pretend this isn't affecting them. The rumble of engines, the clink of tools, the steady soundtrack of American pride, it all blends into a psychological pressure that seeps through the walls of Dorothy's house like water through cracks. By mid-am morning, the community has fully awakened to what's happening. Phyllis arrives with a wagon full of sandwiches. The man from 2 houses down brings a commercial-sized coffee urn. A woman who runs a local bakery shows up with boxes of pastries, refuses payment, and sets up a folding table. Vernon bought from my shop every Saturday for 10 years. She says, "This is the least I can do." The gathering transforms. What started as a vigil is becoming something larger. A statement. A line drawn in the concrete that says, "Not here. Not in our neighborhood. Not to our people." At 11 Heinz, a white van pulls up with a satellite dish on top. Local news channel 7 Kevin Shaw's handiwork. He'd called them yesterday evening, sent them the squatter's own social media posts, explained the story in terms that any producer would recognize as gold. Elderly veteran's widow. Criminals mocking their victim online. Community banding together. It's the kind of story that writes itself. The reporter, a woman in her 30s named Amanda Chun, sets up her camera with a view of the house and the bikers. She interviews Layan first, his gravel voice perfect for television, telling Vernon's story, explaining what happened to Dorothy. Then she interviews Phyllis, who cries on camera talking about her neighbor's kindness over 40 years. Then Hitch, who explains the legal quagmire that protects criminals over homeowners. The story airs at noon. By 12:30, it's been shared 400 times on social media. By 1, it's been picked up by regional news networks. By 2, it's trending locally on multiple platforms. Bikers Protect Veterans' Widow becomes the headline that spreads like wildfire through Oregon and beyond. Inside the house, Garrett, Brianna, and Travis watch the news coverage on Dorothy's television. And for the first time, something shifts in Garrett's expression. This isn't going the way it usually goes. Usually by day 2, the homeowner has given up, is drowning in legal consultations they can't afford, is isolated and defeated. But Dorothy isn't isolated. She's got an army on her sidewalk in a community that's decided she matters. Brianna paces, looking out the window every few minutes. Every single time she sees bikers looking back. They're not glaring. They're not making threatening gestures. They're just watching, constant, unblinking, present, and somehow that's worse than any threat could be. Travis tries to leave at 2:30, says he's going to get food. He opens the front door, walks down the porch steps, and immediately finds himself walking through a corridor of bikers. They don't move. They don't speak. They just watch him pass. 20 sets of eyes tracking his movement. He makes it to his car, his hands shaking as he fumbles with his keys. Drives away with the feeling of those eyes burning into his back. He returns an hour later with fast food bags, has to walk that same gauntlet again, and by the time he's back inside, he looks like a man who's just run a marathon. "This is insane," he mutters. They're everywhere. Garrett tries to maintain control, tries to project the confidence that's carried him through 6 previous operations. They'll get bored. They'll leave. They always do. But even as he says it, he's looking out the window again and the bikers are still there. If anything, there are more of them now. He counts 23 in the neighbors and the news van that hasn't left. And the constant unending music reminding him that this house belongs to the widow of a man who served his country while Garrett spent his life exploiting it. For the first time in his career as a professional squatter, Garrett Walsh feels something unfamiliar. Not quite fear, not yet, but the beginning of doubt. The sense that maybe, just maybe, he's miscalculated. But the bikers weren't just sitting there. Phase 2 was already in motion. And this is where it got brilliant. While the bikers maintain their visible presence on Willow Creek Road, Diana Ruiz is waging a different kind of war. Her dining room table has become command central, covered in legal documents, Oregon statutes printed and highlighted, case law precedents stacked in neat piles. She's been on the phone with the county clerk's office since they opened, filing emergency motions that most people don't even know exist. Oregon revised Statute 124.110, she explains to Hitch, who's reviewing her work before submission. Elder abuse provisions. We can argue that this constitutes financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Dorothy's 71, recently widowed, and these criminals targeted her specifically because of her vulnerability. That's not just trespassing, that's elder abuse, and that changes everything. She's also invoking veteran protection statutes, federal laws designed to protect service members and their families from predatory practices. Vernon's military service, his decorated record, his recent death. It all becomes part of the legal framework Diana's building. Each motion is meticulously researched, properly formatted, filed through correct channels. No shortcuts, no errors that could get them dismissed on technicalities. Pitch makes 3 calls that morning. First to the Veterans of Foreign Wars post in Riverside County, then to the American Legion, then to a coalition of veteran advocacy groups. By afternoon, representatives from all 3 organizations are on Willow Creek Road, adding their presence to the bikers, their organizational weight to the cause. These aren't just community members anymore. These are official veteran support networks, and their involvement means media coverage multiplies, means elected officials start paying attention in ways they can't ignore. Kevin Xiao, meanwhile, has launched a social media campaign that would impress any professional marketing firm. He's created a hashtag that trends within hours. He's edited together a video using the squatters' own social media posts. They're mocking videos juxtaposed with images of Vernon's military service, of Dorothy tending her roses, of the broken door and stolen piece. The video is 3 minutes long and it's been viewed 40,000 times by end of day 2. But Kevin's real genius is in making the squatters famous in the worst possible way. He's compiled their faces, their names, their histories, and presented it all as a public service announcement. These are professional criminals who target elderly homeowners, the Post reads. They've done this in California, Washington, Idaho, and now Oregon. Share this. Make sure they're recognized everywhere they go. The response is immediate and overwhelming. People who've never met Dorothy share the story. Local businesses print the squatters' photos and post them with not welcome notices. And then something unexpected happens. Other victims start coming forward. A woman in Boise comments on Kevin's post. Garrett Walsh did this to my father 2 years ago. Dad lost his house. Died 6 months later. I didn't know how to fight back. Another comment from Sacramento. Another from Portland. 7 past victims in total. Each with similar stories. Each with documentation. Each with proof that this isn't Dorothy's isolated incident, but part of a pattern stretching back years. Kevin compiles it all, creates a master thread, tags news organizations and law enforcement agencies. The story evolves from one widow's struggle into an expose of systematic elder abuse. The media coverage intensifies. By day 3, this isn't just local news anymore. Regional outlets pick it up, then national ones. The pressure on county officials becomes impossible to ignore. The prosecutor's office receives 847 phone calls in a single day. The mayor's office gets 1-200. County commissioners are flooded with emails demanding action, demanding justice for Dorothy, demanding an explanation for how the legal system protects criminals over victims. But while the public pressure builds, the bikers are doing something even more important. They're documenting everything. Everything. Wrench, positioned with a clear view through a side window, photographs Travis removing items from Dorothy's house and loading them into a car. Time-stamped photos, clear images. He watches Travis drive away, follows at a legal distance, and documents him pulling into a pawn shop parking lot. More photos, then screenshots of those same items appearing on Craigslist an hour later, being sold by an account traced back to Brianna's email address. Diana adds it to the growing file. That's theft. Grand theft if the value exceeds $1,000, which Vernon's military memorabilia certainly does. That's a felony. Another biker positioned on the opposite side notices construction debris being carried out. The squatters are making modifications inside, knocking out a wall based on the sounds. Kevin calls the county building inspection office. Are there permits filed for construction at this address? There aren't. Building code violations get added to the list. Inspectors get notified. More official attention gets focused on that house. Every window becomes a point of observation. Every action the squatters take gets documented, time-stamped, Cataloged. When Garrett throws Vernon's belongings into trash bags and dumps them in the backyard, there are photos. When Brianna spray paints over the address numbers on the mailbox, trying to make the house harder to identify, there's video. When Travis parks illegally, blocking the sidewalk that bikers are legally occupying, there's documentation and a call to parking enforcement. The bikers aren't warriors with weapons. They're warriors with smartphones, cameras, legal pads, and a deep understanding that sometimes the most powerful force isn't violence, but meticulous, irrefutable documentation. Hitch coordinates it all from a folding table set up on the sidewalk, his laptop open, files organized in color-coded folders. He looks less like a motorcycle club president and more like a field general running a complex operation, which in essence he is. Every piece of evidence gets reviewed, verified, and filed appropriately. Every violation gets reported through proper channels. Every legal avenue gets explored and exploited. Diana files 6 more motions on day 3, restraining orders to prevent further property damage. Motions to expedite eviction hearings, citing the theft and destruction being documented in real time. Motions invoking emergency protective orders for vulnerable adults. She's flooding the system with legitimate legal actions, each one properly filed, each one backed by evidence, each one making it harder for the county to continue treating this as a simple civil dispute. The pressure becomes omnidirectional. Public pressure from social media and news coverage. Legal pressure from properly filed motions and documented violations. Physical pressure from the constant, unblinking presence of bikers and veterans and neighbors who refuse to look away. And psychological pressure from the squatters' growing realization that they're not anonymous anymore, that their faces are being shared thousands of times, that their methods are being exposed, that their past victims are organizing. Inside Dorothy's house, the walls are closing in, literally and figuratively. Garrett stops posting on social media, but the damage is done. His own videos are being used against him in court filings. Brianna's getting recognized when she tries to go to the store. People staring, whispering, one person calling her out by name. Travis is barely sleeping, jumping at every sound, convinced the bikers are going to do something, even though they haven't done anything except watch and document. By day 3, the county prosecutor's office received 847 phone calls. The mayor's office, 1-200, and the squatters they were about to crack. If you can't stand scammers who exploit the vulnerable, smash that like button, because what happens next is pure justice. 4 in the morning, day 3, and the darkness on Willow Creek Road is suddenly shattered by sound. 30. Harley-Davidson engines roar to life in perfect synchronization. A thunderous mechanical symphony that rolls through the pre-dawn silence like an earthquake. It lasts exactly 30 seconds, just long enough to ensure everyone within 3 blocks is awake, short enough to remain within legal noise parameters for emergency vehicle testing and maintenance. Inside Dorothy's house, Garrett Walsh bolds upright in bed, his heart hammering. Brianna stumbles out of the guest room, her face pale. Travis is already at the window, pulling back the curtain to see 30 bikers standing beside their motorcycles in the dim glow of streetlights. Engines rumbling, their faces barely visible, but their presence absolutely undeniable. The engines cut off simultaneously. Silence returns, but sleep doesn't, because now the squatters know that at any moment that sound could return. And it does. At 6 mo, another synchronized start. At 7:30, another. Each one perfectly legal. Each one carefully timed. Each one a reminder that the bikers control the rhythm of this siege, that they decide when peace exists and when it doesn't. By full daylight, there are 30 bikers in rotation on that street, and they've been joined by at least 20 neighbors. Phyllis has organized a schedule. People bring coffee, breakfast, shifts of watchers who spell each other so that there's never a moment when that house isn't under observation. Someone brings a canopy tent. Someone else brings portable heaters as the morning air carries autumn's chill. What started as a biker operation has become a full community mobilization. Every window of Dorothy's house now has a biker visible from inside. Not by accident. They've positioned themselves strategically so that no matter which direction the squatters look, they see leather vests, folded arms, patient faces that never seem to blink. The psychological weight of being constantly watched, constantly visible, constantly known. It begins to fracture something in the squatter's confidence. Garrett hasn't slept more than 2 hours. His hands shake when he pours coffee. He keeps checking his phone, scrolling through social media, watching his face appear in post after post, shared and reshared. His past victims commenting, strangers calling him names he can't argue with because they're accurate. Professional criminal, elder abuser, predator. The anonymity that's always protected him is gone, burned away by the light of public attention. At 9 Mile, a car pulls up that makes every biker stand a little straighter. Phyllis is driving, and in the passenger seat sits Dorothy Arburn. She's been staying at Phyllis's house, watching the news coverage, hearing about the community response. But this is the first time she's returned to see her home since that terrible night. Leon opens her car door, offers his hand, and Dorothy emerges slowly, her eyes immediately finding her house. Her home, the place where she built 40 years of life with Vernon. From the outside, it looks the same, but she knows what's been taken, what's been violated, what can never be exactly as it was. She's surrounded by bikers as she walks to the sidewalk, a protective circle that moves with her. She stops at the property line, doesn't cross it because Hitch has been clear about staying within legal bounds. And she just stands there, staring at her front porch, at Vernon's rose garden, visible in the side yard, at windows that now hold stranger shadows. The front door opens. Garrett Walsh steps out onto the porch, and there's something desperate in the way he moves. Something that says he's trying to reclaim authority that's slipping through his fingers like water. He sees Dorothy, sees the bikers, sees the news cameras that have been permanent fixtures for 2 days now. And he makes a choice, the wrong choice. He walks down the porch steps, crosses the yard, and stops just on his side of the property line. Close enough that his voice carries when he speaks. "You need to call off your dogs, old woman. This is harassment. I'll sue. I'll press charges. You'll lose everything." The words are meant to intimidate. They're the same words that have worked on past victims, elderly and isolated and afraid. But Dorothy isn't isolated, and Garrett has severely miscalculated. Leon Briggs steps forward, positioning himself between Dorothy and Garrett. And his voice when it comes out is quiet, but carries the weight of a man who's face down worse than small-time criminals in stolen houses. "You want to try that again, son?" It's not a threat. It's a question, an invitation to reconsider. And Garrett, looking past Leon at the 30 bikers behind him, at the neighbors, at the veterans in their organizational vests, at the cameras recording every second, realizes with sudden crushing clarity that he is outnumbered 50-1. That whatever intimidation he thought he could project is nothing less than nothing against the united front of a community that's decided to draw a line. He backs up a step, then another. His bravado crumbles visibly, his face flushing red, and without another word he turns and walks back into the house. But everyone watching knows what just happened. The power dynamic has shifted completely, irrevocably. Dorothy, still standing on that sidewalk with Leon beside her, starts to cry. Not from fear, from something else. Relief maybe, or hope, or the overwhelming feeling of being protected after weeks of feeling utterly alone. The news cameras capture everything. The confrontation, the retreat, the elderly widows surrounded by protectors, the criminal backing down. The footage airs within the hour, and it spreads faster than anything yet. Because people understand this image viscerally, good versus evil, community versus predator, David versus Goliath. Except David has brought 30 friends, and they're all wearing leather. That confrontation was the beginning of the end because that night, the squatters made their fatal mistake. 9:30 at night, day 3, and the streetlights cast long shadows across Willow Creek Road. The bikers have settled into their evening rotation. 12 on duty, others resting in shifts at the clubhouse. The news vans have left for the night. The neighborhood is quiet, except for the low murmur of conversation among the watchers, and the occasional rumble of a motorcycle engine being checked. Inside Dorothy's house, Garrett Walsh makes his decision. They're leaving. Not permanently, he tells himself. Just temporarily, get out. Let things cool down. Come back when the attention fades. It's what he's done before when situations got complicated. Disappear. Resurface somewhere else. Move on to easier targets. At 9:15, the garage door opens. The bikers watch but don't move. They're not here to physically prevent anyone from leaving. That would be false imprisonment, illegal detention. They're here to watch and document. So they watch as Travis backs a rental truck out of the garage, a 16-footer, the kind you use for moving entire households. Kevin Xiao, sitting in a lawn chair with his laptop balanced on his knees, sees the truck and his eyes narrow. His fingers fly across the keyboard. He's been monitoring everything, including rental truck companies in the area. 3 hours ago, a truck was rented using Travis Kemp's credit card, picked up from a location 6 mi away. Kevin had flagged it, then made a note, waited to see what it meant. Now he knows they're not fleeing, they're stealing. He pulls up his phone, dials Hitch's number. The truck, they're not running. They're trying to take everything valuable before they go. We need to move now. Hitch is already standing, already thinking through the legal implications, the timing, the evidence they need. Can you prove intent? Travis rented it under his own name. They're loading it at night after 3 days of pressure. After their faces are all over social media, they know they're losing the house, so they're going to strip it first, just like they've done before. Hitch nods, pulls out his own phone, dials 911 for the second time in 3 days, but this time he's not calling about trespassing or civil disputes. I need to report a theft in progress. Suspects are actively loading stolen property into a vehicle. Yes, I can stay on the line. The address is Dorothy Rayburn's home on Willow Creek Road. Officers have been here before. This is different. This is a felony. The bikers position themselves strategically. Cameras out, documenting everything. The squatters are moving fast now, carrying boxes, furniture, anything they can fit through the door. Vernon's leather recliner, Dorothy's antique lamp, boxes that clearly contain more than just their own possessions. And then Garrett emerges carrying something that makes every veteran watching go rigid. Vernon's military trunk? The one that sat at the foot of his bed. The one containing his dress uniform, his medals, his service photos, things that cannot be replaced, things that carry value far beyond monetary worth. Wrench's hands curl into fists. Leon takes a step forward before catching himself. They're so close to the line, so close to intervening physically, but Hitch's voice cuts through the anger. Document it. Let them hang themselves. The police are 2 minutes out. 2 minutes feels like 2 hours. The squatters keep loading. Vernon's trunk goes into the truck. More boxes, a television, artwork from the walls. They're working frantically now, sensing maybe that time is running out, that their window is closing. Sirens in the distance, growing louder. The squatters hear them too. Garrett shouts something, tells Travis to close up the truck, tells Brianna to get in the car. They're going to make a run for it, but they're too late. 3 patrol cars turn onto Willow Creek Road, lights flashing, and everything stops. Officers Yates and Gomez emerge from the first car. And this time their approach is different. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is a crime scene. Hitch walks forward, hands visible, carrying a tablet loaded with evidence. Officers, we've documented everything. Time-stamped photographs of items being removed from the house. We have proof of ownership for multiple items currently in that truck. And we have the homeowner's statement that none of this was authorized. Yates takes the tablet, scrolls through images, and his face hardens. He's seen the news coverage. He knows the story, and now he's seeing a felony theft in progress, documented so thoroughly that prosecution will be straightforward. Don't move, he calls to the squatters. Nobody goes anywhere. Garrett tries his usual confidence. This is our stuff. We're just moving out like you wanted. That's interesting, Gomez says, walking to the back of the truck because this military trunk has a nameplate that says Vernon Rern. You want to explain how that's your property? The silence that follows is absolute. Caught red-handed irrefutably, but Diana's legal research has uncovered something even more significant. She arrives on scene slightly out of breath from rushing over and hands a printed document to Officer Yates. Travis Kemp has an outstanding warrant in Nevada. Failure to appear on fraud charges. He's been wanted for 8 months. Extraditable offense. Yates reads the warrant, verifies it on his system, and turns to Travis. Sir, you're under arrest for the outstanding Nevada warrant and for suspicion of grand theft. The handcuffs come out. Travis has read his rights, his face ashen, his hands shaking. Then Garrett, arrested for theft and conspiracy. Then Brianna, same charges. All 3 of them loaded into separate patrol cars while bikers and neighbors watch in silence. The military trunk is removed from the truck, returned to the sidewalk where Lyon stands guard over it like it's sacred ground, which to him and everyone who served it is. Officer Yates approaches Hitch, and there's something like respect in his expression. You did this right. Every step legal, documented, patient. I've been doing this job 20 years, and I've never seen anything quite like it. Hitch nods. We learn from the best. Vernon Rayburn. He taught us that the hardest battles aren't won with force, but with discipline. The patrol cars pull away carrying 3 criminals who thought they'd found an easy target and instead found an entire community unwilling to look away. The bikers remain on that sidewalk, watching the tail lights disappear. And for the first time in 3 days, the tension breaks. Someone starts clapping, then another. Then the whole street erupts in applause. But the story doesn't end with an arrest. What the bikers did next showed why this community would never be the same. Dawn breaks on day 4. And for the first time in 72 hours, the tension that's hung over Willow Creek Road like storm clouds finally lifts. The county releases Dorothy's property back to her at 8 in the morning. All legal holds removed. The fraudulent lease officially voided. The criminal investigation complete enough that she can reclaim what was always hers. Leon Briggs drives her home himself, Phyllis in the back seat. And when they turn onto her street, Dorothy sees something that makes her breath catch. The bikers are still there, 30 strong, but they're not sitting in lawn chairs anymore. They're working, moving with purpose, and they're not alone. The entire neighborhood has shown up. Men carrying toolboxes, women with cleaning supplies, teenagers with trash bags and work gloves. The community that washed for 3 days has transformed into a restoration crew, and they're already inside her house, undoing the damage left behind by 3 criminals who treated someone's home like a disposable resource. Dorothy walks through her front door, and the first thing she notices is the smell, cleaning solution, and fresh paint replacing the stale air of occupation. The broken doorframe has been removed, a new one already being installed by Wrench and 2 other bikers who apparently know their way around carpentry, as well as they know their way around motorcycles. The walls that were scuffed and marked are being repainted by volunteers who learned about the story on the news and showed up with supplies asking how they could help. In the living room, someone has carefully collected all of Dorothy's family photographs that have been taken down, scattered, treated as worthless by people who understood nothing about the value of memory. Now they're being cleaned, reframed where needed, organized on a table waiting to be returned to their rightful places on the mantel and walls. Diana approaches Dorothy with something wrapped in cloth. She unfolds it carefully, revealing Vernon's bronze star, his purple heart, his service medals that Travis had taken to a pawn shop downtown. Kevin tracked them down yesterday, Diana explained softly. The club pulled money and bought them back. They were never really gone, Dorothy. We wouldn't let them be. Dorothy takes the medals with shaking hands, holds them against her chest, and has to sit down as emotion overwhelms her. These pieces of metal, these symbols of her husband's courage and sacrifice. She thought she'd lost them forever. But here they are, returned, protected, honored by people who understand that some things are sacred. In the kitchen, Phyllis is directing a cleaning operation that would impress a military general. Counters are being scrubbed, appliances checked and repaired where the squatters damaged them, cabinets restocked with supplies that neighbors brought from their own homes. Someone is fixing the cabinet door that have been torn off its hinges. Someone else is replacing light bulbs, checking outlets, ensuring everything works the way it should. But it's when Dorothy walks to the back door and steps into her garden that she truly breaks. The rose bushes, Vernon's roses, the living calendar of their marriage. They'd been trampled during the occupation. Branches broken, blooms torn off, the careful cultivation of 40 years treated with careless destruction. She'd seen the damage through the window during those 3 days of exile, and it had hurt almost as much as everything else. Except now the garden is restored. Not perfectly. Some damage can't be undone. But someone has carefully pruned the broken branches, treated the bushes, cleared away the debris, and replanted where possible. And kneeling among the roses, his hands in the soil, is Leon Briggs. This 73-year-old veteran, this road captain of a motorcycle club. This man who spent 3 days orchestrating a siege is now tending flowers with the gentleness of someone who understands that healing comes in many forms. He looks up, sees Dorothy watching, and his gravel voice softens. Vernon showed me pictures of this garden once. Told me every bush had a story. Figured it deserved some respect. Dorothy walks over, kneels beside him despite her protesting knees, and touches the bush planted for their 40th anniversary. It's damaged but alive, already showing signs of new growth where Leon has carefully pruned and treated it. He loved these roses, she whispers. Sometimes I think he loved them almost as much as he loved me. He loved you more, Leon says with certainty. But these roses, they were his way of showing it. Every year, one more promise growing in the ground. They work in silence for a moment. 2 people connected by a man no longer present, but never really gone. Around them, the sounds of restoration continue. Hammers, voices, the ordinary symphony of community in action. Back inside, the transformation continues. By noon, the house is unrecognizable from the crime scene. It was just hours ago. Fresh paint dries on walls. Furniture sits in proper places. The floors have been cleaned and polished. Vernon's military trunk sits at the foot of the bed where it belongs. His uniform visible inside, treated with reverence by everyone who handled it. Leon walks to the mantel carrying the shadow box containing Vernon's medals, now cleaned and restored. He places it in its position of honor above the fireplace, then sets Vernon's photograph beside it. The same photograph that's been there for decades. Vernon in his dress uniform, young and serious and alive with the knowledge that he'd survived something terrible and come home to build something beautiful. Dorothy stands in her living room surrounded by bikers and neighbors and strangers who became friends, and she looks at Vernon's face looking back at her from that photograph. The tears come then not from grief but from gratitude so profound it has no other outlet. Vernon always said you'd be there, she tells Leon, her voice breaking. The last time I saw him before he passed, he was worried. Worried about leaving me alone. I told him I'd be fine, but he made me promise to keep your number. He said, if anything happened, if I ever needed help, you'd come. I didn't believe it, really. 40 years is a long time. People move on. But he was right. You came. All of you came. Leon steps forward, and this man who's seen combat, who's lived a hard life, who's carried wounds visible and invisible, puts his arms around Dorothy Rayburn and lets her cry against his shoulder. Vernon was my brother, he says simply. That doesn't end. Not with time. Not with death, not ever. The wheels of justice, once they finally begin to turn, move with surprising speed when evidence is overwhelming and public attention is unrelenting. Garrett Walsh, Brianna Navault, and Travis Kemp face their reckoning in a Riverside County courtroom 6 weeks after their arrest on Willow Creek Road. The prosecution presents a case so thoroughly documented that the defense has little room to maneuver. Time-stamped photographs of stolen property. Video evidence from the squatters' own social media accounts. Testimony from Dorothy, from the bikers, from neighbors who witnessed everything. Records of the forged lease analyzed and confirmed as fraudulent by document experts. Evidence of prior similar crimes across 3 states. The pattern is undeniable. The guilt is irrefutable. Garrett Walsh receives 18 months in prison. The judge cites fraud, elder abuse, and grand theft, noting in her sentencing remarks that his systematic targeting of vulnerable homeowners represents a particularly cruel form of predatory behavior. You didn't just steal property, Judge Patricia Morrison says from the bench. You stole security, peace, and dignity from people in their most vulnerable moments. The law is designed to protect the innocent, not to be weaponized against them. Brianna Volt receives 12 months plus 3 years probation and court-ordered restitution. Her prior identity theft conviction works against her, establishing a pattern of exploiting others for financial gain. The judge makes clear that the sentence would have been longer had she shown any remorse. But throughout the proceedings, Brianna maintains that they did nothing wrong, that they were simply using legal loopholes that existed for anyone smart enough to find them. Travis Kemp faces the harshest consequences. The Nevada warrant alone carries a 2-year sentence. And the Oregon charges add another year, 3 years total, with the possibility of additional time if Nevada chooses to pursue other charges he'd been evading. His attempt to flee the jurisdiction, his participation in the theft of military memorabilia, his complete lack of contrition, all of it weighs against him. But the legal reckoning extends beyond these 3 individuals. The media attention that Kevin Xiao helped generate, the viral spread of their story, it creates something the squatters never anticipated. Their previous victims, isolated and defeated in their own separate struggles, suddenly discover they're not alone. 7 civil lawsuits are filed within 2 months. The woman from Boise whose father lost his house. The family from Sacramento who couldn't afford to fight back. The elderly couple from Portland who ended up homeless for 6 months while their case crawled through court. They all come forward, enabled by the documentation the bikers helped compile, emboldened by Dorothy's victory, represented by attorneys who take their cases pro bono. After seeing the news coverage, Garrett Walsh's assets, such as they are, get frozen pending civil judgments. The carefully constructed system he built to exploit legal loopholes begins collapsing under the weight of accountability he never expected to face. His social media accounts, once a training ground for aspiring squatters, become evidence in multiple proceedings. His followers, many of whom were documenting their own predatory operations, scatter like cockroaches when light hits them. The ripple effects continue beyond individual justice. Oregon State Representative Michael Torres, who represents Riverside County, sees the outrage from his constituents and recognizes both a moral imperative and a political opportunity. He introduces legislation that becomes known informally as Vernon's Law. Designed to close the loopholes that professional squatters exploit, the bill streamlines eviction proceedings in cases where fraud can be demonstrated. It creates harsher penalties for forged lease agreements. It establishes protections specifically for elderly homeowners and surviving spouses of veterans. It allows for emergency hearings when elder abuse is suspected. Most importantly, it shifts the burden of proof in cases where occupants cannot produce clear chain of custody for their claimed teeny rights. The legislation faces opposition from tenant advocacy groups who worry legitimately about unintended consequences for legitimate renters. But Dorothy Rayburn herself testifies before the state legislature, and her testimony carries weight that statistics and legal arguments cannot match. "I believe in protecting tenants," she tells the assembled lawmakers, her voice steady despite the unfamiliar setting. "Vernon and I rented for the first 5 years of our marriage. I know what it's like to be at the mercy of a landlord. But what happened to me wasn't a tenant dispute. It was a crime disguised as teeny. There's a difference between someone who needs shelter and someone who weaponizes the law to steal homes from vulnerable people. We can protect both. We should protect both." The legislation passes with bipartisan support. Signed into law 9 months after Dorothy stood on her own sidewalk watching criminals occupy her home. It's not perfect. Legal scholars will debate its implications for years, but it's a start, a recognition that laws designed to protect can also be exploited, and that the system must evolve to address sophisticated bad actors. Dorothy becomes an unlikely advocate, speaking at veteran organizations, at community groups, at legislative hearings in other states considering similar reforms. She tells Vernon's story, tells her own story, and always credits the Iron Ridge Riders and the community that refused to look away. "They thought they'd found the perfect target," she says in a speech that gets shared thousands of times online. An elderly widow alone, grieving, with no one to fight for her. "They researched me. They planned this. They knew exactly what they were doing. But they made one fatal miscalculation. I wasn't alone. I had Vernon's family. And that family, those bikers, those neighbors, those strangers who became friends, they showed me that predators only win when good people do nothing. We did something and we won. They thought they'd found the perfect target. They found a family. 3 months after Dorothy Rayburn reclaims her home, the Iron Ridge Riders gather in their clubhouse for a meeting that will change the trajectory of their organization. Leon Briggs stands at the front of the room, and spread across the table before him are letters. Dozens of them, from veterans' widows in California, Washington, Idaho, and beyond, from elderly homeowners who've seen the news coverage and are facing similar situations. From families who don't know how to fight back against professional squatters, who understand the legal system better than they do. "We did something good," Leon says, his gravel voice carrying to every corner of the room. "But it can't be a one-time thing. What happened to Dorothy is happening to people all over this country, and most of them don't have a phone number to call. Most of them don't have a Vernon who made sure they'd be protected. We need to change that." What emerges from that meeting is the Veteran Guardian Program, a formalized initiative that takes the lessons learned on Willow Creek Road and transforms them into a replicable model. Hitch, with his legal background, drafts the framework. Diana develops the protocols. Kevin creates the communication infrastructure, and the entire club commits to making this bigger than one rescue, bigger than one community. The program partners with legal aid societies across Oregon, creating a network where attorneys can quickly connect with volunteer advocates when elder abuse cases emerge. They establish a hotline staffed by club members trained in crisis response, where vulnerable homeowners can call for help. They develop educational materials explaining squatters' rights laws, how to protect property, what documentation to maintain, and how to respond if criminals attempt occupation. But the most powerful element of the Veteran Guardian Program is the Rapid Response Protocol. When a case comes in, when someone calls that hotline with a story that echoes Dorothy's nightmare, the response is immediate and coordinated. Legal review happens within hours. Volunteers mobilize within a day. The visible, legal, persistent presence that worked on Willow Creek Road gets deployed wherever it's needed. The model spreads faster than anyone anticipated. Other motorcycle clubs, inspired by the news coverage of Dorothy's case, reach out asking how they can implement similar programs in their regions. Veterans of foreign wars posts adopt modified versions. American Legion chapters create their own rapid response networks. What started as one club protecting one widow becomes a nationwide movement of communities deciding that elder abuse, that predatory squatting, that exploitation of the vulnerable will no longer be met with isolated struggle, but with collective action. By the end of the first year, the Veteran Guardian Program and its affiliated networks have been involved in 23 cases across 7 states. Not all of them end in arrests. Not all of them make the news, but all of them end with homeowners back in their homes with criminals faced with consequences, with communities discovering that they have more power than they realized when they choose to use it. The bikers don't show up with weapons or threats. They show up with lawn chairs and legal pads, with cameras and knowledge of municipal codes, with patience, and the understanding that some battles require not violence, but visibility. They make it impossible for predators to operate in shadows. They document everything. They work within every legal boundary, and they win not through force, but through the relentless application of legitimate pressure. In Montana, a motorcycle club helps an 82-year-old rancher reclaim his property from squatters who'd moved in while he was hospitalized. In Arizona, a veterans group prevents an attempted occupation by maintaining watch over a widow's home after her husband's funeral. The criminals backing off when they realize the house isn't unprotected. In Washington, a coordinated effort between 3 organizations results in the arrest of a squatting ring that had victimized 11 elderly homeowners over 2 years. The pattern interrupt comes in a community center in Eugene, Oregon, where Raymond Kowalski stands in front of 70 people, teaching a legal workshop on property rights and self-P protection. He's wearing his Iron Ridge vest, his legal background on full display, and he's explaining complicated statutes and language that anyone can understand. Beside him, Diana Ruiz distributes handouts detailing warning signs of squatting operations, emergency contact numbers, and step-by-step guides for documentation. These aren't the stereotypical bikers of popular imagination. They're educators, advocates, protectors who've chosen to use their brotherhood for something that matters. And the people attending the workshop, elderly homeowners and their families, veterans and their spouses, they're taking notes, asking questions, sharing their own stories of near misses and narrow escapes. The system has loopholes, Hitch tells the crowd. We can't pretend it doesn't, but loopholes work both ways. Everything the squatters use to exploit vulnerable people, we can use to protect them. The key is knowledge, documentation, and community. You are not alone. You don't have to be alone. That's what we're building here. After the workshop, an elderly woman approaches Leon. Her husband died 6 months ago. She's received suspicious calls asking about her property. People driving by slowly taking pictures. She's scared but didn't know who to call or what to do. Leon takes her information, adds her to the program's monitoring list, connects her with local volunteers who will check on her regularly. One more person who won't face the nightmare Dorothy faced. One more family protected before the crime happens instead of after. The Veteran Guardian program doesn't eliminate predatory squatting. The problem is too widespread, too lucrative for criminals, too embedded in legal complexities, but it creates consequences where none existed before. It builds networks where isolation once ruled. It proves that communities have power when they choose to exercise it, that ordinary people doing legal things in coordinated ways can achieve extraordinary results. From tragedy comes transformation. From one widow's nightmare comes a movement that protects thousands. And at the center of it all remains the simple truth that Leon Briggs spoke in Dorothy's driveway. Some bonds don't break, some promises don't expire, and family means showing up when it matters most. 6 months after that terrible night when strangers broke into her home, Dorothy Rayburn stands in her kitchen on a Saturday morning, and the house is filled with life again. Not the quiet, grief-heavy silence that settled after Vernon's passing, but the sound of laughter conversation, the rumble of motorcycles pulling up outside, and the smell of burgers cooking on a grill in her backyard. It's become a tradition, these monthly gatherings. The first Saturday of every month, the Iron Ridge Riders descend on Willow Creek Road, not as protectors anymore, but as family. They bring food, stories, and a presence that transforms Dorothy's home from a place of lonely mourning into something vibrant and alive. Leon always arrives first, wrench close behind, and within an hour, her modest ranch house overflows with leather vests, loud voices, and the kind of belonging that doesn't require blood relation. Dorothy has become what no one expected, but everyone now takes for granted. The surrogate grandmother to an entire motorcycle club. She fusses over Kevin's eating habits, insists he's too thin. She lectures Wrench about his high blood pressure, makes him promise to see a doctor. She listens to Diana's stories about her teenage daughter, offers advice worn smooth by decades of life lived. These men and women who showed up to save her have stayed to love her, and she returns that love with the fierce devotion of someone who understands what true family means. In the backyard, the rose garden has expanded. Vernon's original bushes remain carefully tended, but now there's a new section. a memorial garden where Dorothy has planted roses in honor of fallen veterans that club members knew, brothers and sisters who didn't make it home or who came home but couldn't outrun their demons. Each bush has a small marker with a name and dates. Each one represents a life remembered, honored, kept alive in petals and thorns, and the patient work of nurturing growth from soil. Vernon's marker sits at the center, a polished stone surrounded by the deepest red roses Dorothy could find. She tends this garden every morning, talking to Vernon as she always has. But now she also talks to these other names, these other stories, these other families that the club carries in their hearts. Dorothy's purpose has evolved beyond her own healing. She mentors now, spending hours on the phone with elderly homeowners who've heard about her story and reach out for guidance. She walks them through the fear, explains their rights, connects them with the Veteran Guardian program, and most importantly, reminds them that they're not alone. Her voice carries the authority of someone who survived the nightmare they're facing. And that authority brings comfort that no legal statute can provide. She testifies before legislative committees. Her presence a powerful reminder of why laws matter, why protections need teeth, why the system must serve the vulnerable rather than enable their exploitation. When Vernon's law passes, when the governor signs it with Dorothy standing beside him, the moment carries weight beyond policy. It's vindication. It's memorial. It's Vernon's service continuing even after his death, protecting others the way he protected his country. But it's the small moments that reveal how completely Dorothy's life has transformed. This morning, like she's done for 40 years, she pulls 2 ceramic mugs from the cabinet, the blue ones with faded flowers. She pours coffee into both, adding cream to one, just the way Vernon liked it. But now, when Leon walks through the door right on schedule, that second cup isn't sitting empty as a memorial to absence. It's waiting for him, for the promise kept, for the family that showed up and stayed. She hands him the mug, and Leon accepts it the way he always does, with a nod that says more than words could. They stand together in her kitchen, drinking coffee as the sun streams through lace curtains, and Dorothy realizes something profound. She's not waiting anymore. Not waiting for grief to ease. Not waiting for life to feel normal again. Not waiting for purpose to return. She's living fully, completely surrounded by people who chose to be her family when blood family was an ocean away. The sound of motorcycles continues outside. More arrivals, more family. Dorothy sets out plates, far more than 2 now, and begins preparing for the gathering that will fill her home with noise and warmth and the beautiful chaos of belonging. When people ask what made Dorothy Rayburn's story different, what transformed a seemingly hopeless situation into a victory that sparked nationwide change, the answer isn't simple. It's not one thing. It's everything working together in ways that revealed something profound about what communities can accomplish when they refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Community solidarity was the foundation. Not the abstract concept that gets mentioned in speeches, but the concrete reality of neighbors showing up with coffee at dawn, of strangers becoming friends through shared purpose, of an entire street deciding that what happened to Dorothy mattered enough to disrupt their own lives. Solidarity meant Phyllis opening her home without hesitation. It meant the bakery owner bringing pastries every morning. It meant people taking vacation days to sit on a sidewalk and bear witness. That kind of solidarity can't be manufactured or mandated. It emerges when people recognize themselves in someone else's suffering and choose connection over convenience. Legal knowledge transformed good intentions into effective action. Without Hitch's understanding of property law, without Diana's paralegal expertise, without their ability to navigate statutes and file motions and speak the language of courts, the community's outrage would have been righteous but ultimately powerless. They didn't just feel strongly about injustice. They understood how to use the system against those who'd weaponized it, finding every legal avenue, exploiting every legitimate pressure point, turning the squatters' own tactics into their downfall. Patience and discipline separated this response from vigilante justice that would have backfired catastrophically. Every moment when bikers wanted to physically intervene, when the temptation to solve the problem with force must have been overwhelming, they held back. They stayed within legal boundaries, not because they were weak, but because they were strategic. They understood that winning meant not just removing criminals from one house, but changing the system so fewer people would face this nightmare. That required moral authority, which disappears the moment laws are broken. Modern tools amplified everything. Kevin's social media campaigns made anonymity impossible for the squatters. Documentation through smartphones and cameras created irrefutable evidence. The viral spread of Dorothy's story generated pressure that local officials couldn't ignore. None of this would have worked 20 years ago. The same crime would have happened, but without the ability to rapidly organize, document, and broadcast. The squatters would have followed their familiar pattern of exploiting legal delays until they'd stripped the house and vanished. Raymond Kowalski, sitting on Dorothy's back porch during one of those monthly gatherings, surrounded by club members and neighbors who've become fixtures in this new chapter of Dorothy's life, reflects on what they accomplished and what it means going forward. "We didn't win with fists," he says, his voice carrying the weight of someone who's thought deeply about violence and its alternatives. "We won with witness, with showing up and refusing to look away, with making it impossible for these criminals to operate in shadows. Vernon taught us that in Vietnam, though he probably didn't realize the lesson would apply decades later in civilian life. Sometimes the smartest weapon is the one you don't fire. The lesson extends beyond one widow's rescue. It's a template proven now in dozens of communities, showing that ordinary people armed with knowledge, patience, and collective will can challenge predatory behavior that seemed unstoppable. It's evidence that broken systems can be fixed when enough people demand change and stay engaged long enough to see it through. It's proof that family isn't just blood, that communities can choose to protect their vulnerable, and that evil only prevails when good people decide someone else's problem isn't their concern." The sun rises over Willow Creek Road on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and Dorothy Rayburn stands on her porch with her coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. A familiar sound reaches her ears. Motorcycles, 3 of them, riding past in formation. Leon in the lead. He raises his hand in acknowledgement as they pass. The weekly check-in. The promise kept not just once, but continuously week after week. A reminder that she's not alone and never will be again. Dorothy waves back, smiling, and returns inside to tend Vernon's roses before the day truly begins. Behind her, the house stands solid and reclaimed. A monument not to what was taken, but to what was restored through the fierce love of people who understood that protecting one widow meant protecting the principle that communities don't abandon their own. The Iron Ridge Writers continue their work. The Veteran Guardian program expands, and Vernon's Law protects homeowners across Oregon. The legacy grows, rooted in one terrible night that became a turning point, proving that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied, and that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to let it succeed. If this story proves that good people can win against broken systems, hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Comment "Justice prevails" if you believe in communities that protect their own. These stories matter. These people matter. And the trolls and predators, they need to know we're watching. Dorothy's fight became everyone's fight because enough people decided that standing by wasn't an option. Maybe someone in your life needs to hear that they're not alone. Maybe someone in your community is facing their own nightmare right now. Share the story. Let it be a reminder that when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice, when they show up with patience and discipline and the determination to do things right, they can move mountains. They can change laws. They can protect the vulnerable, and they can prove that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters most. Justice prevails when we make it prevail. Thanks for watching.